Hello and welcome to the Channel Islands Alteryx User Group 21.4 recap. Let's have a look at our agenda for today. We've got an Alteryx community update. We're going to take a look at some of the latest 21.4 update highlights in terms of Alteryx Designer and Alteryx Server. We're going to take a peek at the supermarket spatial analytics that Matteo here on the team has put together. Very interesting indeed. More about that later. We've got a presentation that's been sponsored by the Government of Jersey Health Informatics team to show how they've structured some emergency department Power BI dashboards powered by their Alteryx server. They shared their journey and how they got to there. We're going to have George on the team. He's going to be demonstrating to you some designer usage reporting, how you can track Alteryx usage more effectively across your organization. And then we're going to finish off with a 5-minute tool mastery session on how to utilize the RegEx tool more effectively. So let's have a look at the community update today. So Alteryx have announced their acquisition of a bit of technology called Trifactor. It's automated in database preparation, data wrangling, they like to call it, and it differs from Alteryx somewhat because it's an ELT bit of technology. It extract, load, and then transform. So this is more in database processing here. It integrates really nicely with Snowflake and some other data warehouse technologies, AI assisted or cloud-based, as with Alteryx's strategy going forward. This is pretty much more focused towards the tech teams, perhaps, for doing some in-database preparation of some data. Just adding an extra bit of extra tools to Alteryx's toolkit, essentially here. Alright, well, let's have a look at the 21.4 release functionalities for Designer first of all. What's new? So we've got some enhancements to the XML parse tool. We can either include or not include this outer XML part here, which if you're familiar with utilizing the tool can be a little bit of a pain. We now have the flexibility to choose to not have that in our output. I'm certainly very happy about this one. Next, we've got the generate support file enhancement. So sometimes if you're experiencing some technical issues with Alteryx Designer and you have to get in contact with Alteryx support via the support@alteryx.com email address, and sometimes they might ask you for screenshots and how, what the issues are, and that can be a little bit of back and forth. Well, if you head into your Designer, click onto help, generate support file, then you can attach that to your email when you're contacting the Alteryx support guys, and that's going to allow them to provide that support to you a lot more effectively than beforehand. We've now got Alteryx license server reservations, so you can actually reserve Alteryx licenses for specific individuals on a licensing server, if that's what you're interested in. Error messages now contain helpful community articles, which is phenomenal for Alteryx new users getting on board, because if we got an error here in this little workflow snippet that we've got, it says parse error at character 15, type mismatch and operator plus. If you're not too familiar with what that means, you're not too versed in Alteryx, and that can be a little bit of confusing. Well, we've now got this learn more button right here, which you can click on. It's going to bring up an Alteryx community article which clearly describes what the error is and how to rectify it within your workflow. There's new data connectors now available in Designer for Google Drive. We can input and output to Google Drive if that's what you're interested in. We can connect up to Automation Anywhere 360 if you happen to utilize that technology. And you can also read in from Outlook 365. So reading in messages from inboxes, saving down attachments from messages in certain inboxes and then read them into your flow, or even perhaps reading in some calendar or diary information as well into your workflow. Can be rather interesting if that's what you're after. Next, we're having a look at the server highlights for 21.4. There's a new release of the APIs, version 3. It's been updated to utilize OAuth 2. We can now modify collections, users, connections, all that sort of stuff with post, put, get, and delete functionality from the API. Really interesting indeed. So if you're an administrator on your server, you should be able to see this little question mark box right here. Click onto API documentation, and then it's going to run through some of the commands that you can use on your Alteryx server. Really interesting if you want to kick off workflows which are on your Alteryx server from other third-party tools. Really nice bit of kit. Next, we're going to have the private studios within a server are being replaced now. They're being called My Workspace from this point onwards in 21.4. It's just a very easier to navigate user interface here on the server to be able to see your workflows in more of a list view as opposed to the tile view that has been there in the server in previous versions. It's basically a new user interface for the workflow details panels. We can see here it's probably a little bit more laid out. So a refresh, a bit of a reskin, I think, on some of these pages on the server. I personally quite like them. It looks a lot cleaner. And the Mongo database has been upgraded from 4.2 to 4.4. And there's a new data connection manager called DCM for short, available on the server as well. It did previously have data connections options in the server, but it's being replaced by this more robust data connection manager, as you can see here. So you can set up connections to certain systems, SQL databases perhaps, for some of your users who utilize Alteryx from your server environment, and then choose to share those connections or credentials with those users in their Designer instance to save them from having to create those themselves manually within their workflows each and every time. Alright, well, I'm just going to pass over to Matteo now, and he's going to run you through some of the spatial analytics work that he's been involved in.
Thank you very much, Ben. So I'm going to talk today just about some supermarket spatial analysis that we've been doing. So to begin with, I just want to do a quick introduction to the spatial tools, because it's maybe a category that a lot of people won't use in their day-to-day jobs. But it's the green tool palette that we can see on the right here. We've got a few examples at the top of some spatial tools, as well as some geocoding tools at the bottom, which is going to allow us to go from addresses and postcodes to the lat long or spatial objects in Alteryx. Just looking at some of the tools on the right here, we've got the create points tool, which is going to allow us to get spatial objects from lat longs. We've got the distance tool to find distance between two objects. We've got the trade area tool, which is going to show us kind of 5-mile rings or 10-mile rings around an object, as well as you might be able to look at some drive time distances around an object. We've also got the spatial process, which is going to allow us to intersect or combine polygons. The spatial info tool, which is going to give us some areas or centers of polygons, as well as the make grids tool, which is going to allow us to break our maps down into maybe 100 by 100 meter grids and start to look at some better ways to map our data. So interestingly, the name Alteryx comes from Alteryx's spatial background, where it was originally used by a US trucking and logistics company. So the name Alter YX comes from Alter and then YX, the YX coordinates. And they found that it was so good for all of their processes that they wanted to use it on all of their data. So just like the rest of the Alteryx tools, it's just drag and drop, tool by tool, all no/low codes, all in that Alteryx mindset. And if you do want to try out some of the spatial tools for yourself, there's lots and lots of weekly challenges on the Alteryx community that you can give a go. I believe the most recent one was on whale spotting. And just another point, if you do want to become Alteryx Advanced Certifieds, you're going to need to learn how to use these tools, as they do come up in the exam. So just what we're going to do today is just to try and answer a few of these questions using some open data that we have on the supermarkets and population of Jersey. So I'm going to want to figure out kind of how popular a supermarket might be based off its location, where in Jersey the highly competitive areas for supermarkets, and conversely where the lowly contested areas for supermarkets may be some underrepresentation in the market. And then we want to know, do these answers relate to the population distribution of Jersey? We've been able to pull some data from Stats Jersey, which is going to help us answer these questions. And then a certain demographics in these areas is going to be important. Maybe we can start to break down the ages or the genders of populations to see how that might be affecting demand. And then finally, can we put this all together to start to help us make some data-driven decisions on where might be underrepresented at the moment, and we would want to create new stores or start expanding some of our existing stores. So what inputs are we going to use today? So we've got the TomTom UK and Republic of Ireland location insights. We're going to be using the peak time dataset. This is going to allow us to do all of our drive time analysis around the supermarkets. we have a .kml file of the enumeration districts from Jersey. And so I'd never heard of this file type before, but it was as simple as chucking it into Alteryx, and it immediately pulled out this nice polygon map up here. We then have some key metrics about these districts, which was provided to us by Stats Jersey. So that includes the population densities and just some more information about the demographics. Finally, we have the lists of some supermarkets around Jersey. We just have some of the big ones at the moment, just kind of like the Waitrose and the Co-ops and the Alliances, M&S and so on. But we've been able just to plot them on the map just based off their lat long. So what outputs were we able to create? We started by just taking all of those supermarket points and saying, where can I reach within 5 minutes drive time from this point? And these are the maps that we created. So in the bottom left there, we've highlighted the Waitrose that's at Red Houses and said, if I was to drive for 5 minutes, where would I get to? Then saying, with all of those different drive time maps, if we overlay them onto each other, where are the highly contested areas in Jersey? You can see there we've got around town in St Helier, and also St Peters, and Red Houses also has a few stores servicing it. We were then able to pull out that population data that we spoke about before, and said where are the densely populated areas in Jersey, and that's shown in the red there. Once again, town, St Peters, Red Houses, all those densely populated areas. We then said, how about if we overlay these two together, and if we say that we'll split each person into how many stores they're contested by. So if one person is serviced by 2 stores, we're going to say there's a 50-50 chance they go to each store. So there'll be half an effective customer to each store. If we then sum that up for the whole population of Jersey, which store is servicing the most effective customers? And we found that actually the Co-op at Pontac, down in the bottom right there, had the highest number of customers. We then did the same for all the stores, and it gave us the list on the right there. So I just wanted to jump into Alteryx itself just to show you a few of the different things that we did. So the next thing we wanted to say was that if we wanted to create a new store in Jersey, where would it be? So what we did is we broke Jersey down into these 100 by 100 meter squares. As shown, we've got 12,000 different options. We said, if we put a store in the middle of here, how good would it be? So we built a drive time around the area to see where it would reach. We then did a spatial match to essentially join it to the population of that area. We then also did an actual join to join it into the competition in that area to get the effective customer, which gave us 2 outputs. So first we wanted to say, how about if there were no stores already in Jersey? Where would be the best place? And we actually found that to be just here around Rouge Bouillon, just where the old police station is, which maybe shows why a shop wasn't built there. And then we did that for all of them, showed this on a map, and the more red the area, the better location it would be, provided there was no other competition. But we know that there is competition, and there's already kind of tens and tens of stores in Jersey. So where would be the best place to be now, given all of that competition? And we found that to be just off First Tower, this kind of grid here. And once again, we can run that for all of the different grids to show that where might be underrepresented in Jersey. So we can see that before, while St Helier was really red, because of the amount of stores in here, it might not be the best place to open a new one. One thing that was pivotal to allowing us to do this was getting polygons of areas, and we were able to do this using the OpenStreetMaps API. So we've built a macro here where you need to head to the OpenStreetMaps website, and you can just search up an area. For example, here I've just searched up Australia. It's then going to give me this OpenStreetMap ID, which for Australia is 8500. I'm able to add it into this macro to say the area as well as the ID, run it through this macro, and I'm going to get this output of this nicely built polygon of the areas I'm looking for. So we've got at the top here, we've got the 12 parishes of Jersey. I've done it again for Australia. That's all I wanted to show today, and I hope you guys found this interesting. And if you've got any questions or anything about this, please do not hesitate to get in touch.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matteo, for running us through that. Really fascinating. Well, I'm going to run you through next the Government of Jersey Health Informatics team presentation that it delivered in person on our Alteryx user group. I'm just going to be running you through some of the highlights from their presentation. So, their use case was that they wanted to take emergency department data and then provide it on a Power BI dashboard so people can interactively see waiting times and some other metrics. And the way they set that up is they utilize Alteryx to connect to source and push it from data source to Power BI. And this is the way they've done it. So I'm going to have a look at their initial setup that they've got here. These are the data source, the data extraction. They've either got a direct ODBC connection to some of those data sources, or they've actually utilized some API connections as well to some of their source systems. That then goes into Alteryx here via the Alteryx server. Now every 15 minutes, you can see here, they're going to write that data from source. It's coming in blended, prepared, then pushed to another SQL data source, which then has a direct query relationship with the Power BI visualizations that I posted here. So in parallel to this, there's some other data stores in a YXDB, that's Alteryx's own file format, sat within a government network drive, and then this is utilized for some ad hoc queries and things like that, just so they don't have to connect from source every single time. But this is really the journey that we're looking at here. This data source coming into Alteryx via the server, joining, cleansing, preparing, get it into a shape which Power BI can start to visualize. That's then persisted within this SQL source and then pushed to Power BI. Now the reason why that's done is because Power BI itself can only refresh itself 8 times a day. From a particular source. However, if it's connected to an SQL database, then you can set up what's known as a direct query relationship between the two, and you can have that as fresh as many times as you like. And of course, we've set up the server to run this extraction of the data from source every 15 minutes, so near live. Now, this is the Alteryx part. You can see they've got an API connection established up here, which connects to those sources, pulls that data out. There's a variety of formulas and preparation that they're doing here with these other tools that you can see here, and then that gets read out to the the SQL database right there, and then this is promoted to their Alteryx server, as we can see here, and then scheduled to run and refresh every 15 minutes. Now that's the Power BI part. As I say, they've got that direct query connection established between the SQL database and the Power BI dashboard. It means it's near live between those two sources. And they said it is really necessary for them to do all of the calculations within Alteryx, because if we're connecting Power BI directly to source, then we're going to have to do all of those transformations, all of that preparation work which Alteryx would usually handle for us within the dashboard itself. When you're trying to open up these visualizations, it can really bog them down. It can make them very slow, very clunky, and then no one's going to want to use them if they're not very friendly to interact with. So the benefit of utilizing Alteryx server in this instance is twofold. One, we can have a more scheduled update of this dashboard compared to what was possible only 8 times a day in Power BI without some extensive licensing. And then all of the calculations happen in Alteryx, so none of that processing has to happen in a Power BI dashboard. It's just presented the data to Power BI in the format that it needs, and then you can click around on these dashboards and change the visuals, drill down a whole lot more effectively. Now, they had a little bit of a refinement process. You can see here, this is an initial POC, and then they got another version here, and then finally ended up with the live version that's represented by this below image down here. Just working iteratively with stakeholders to get it into a really nice format. And the next steps for those guys is to see if they can deploy it across many other areas once they prove this concept and how easy it was to get set up, and then eventually have live waiting time screen within the emergency department waiting room, so people can see how long it's going to perhaps take for them to get through that emergency department. A really, really awesome, innovative way of utilizing the power of Alteryx server combined with Power BI to really get this project live. Thanks so much again for the team for presenting at our in-person user group. Right, well, handing over to George now. He's going to be running through some of the designer use reporting that he's put together. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ben. So yes, I'm going to be talking about designer usage reporting as well as a bit of server usage reporting as well. But before I do so, I'm just going to provide a bit more context around this. So, for those of you that don't know, every single deployment of Alteryx server comes with what's called a MongoDB persistence layer, and that's just another word for an underlying database. And what that means is every single time we interact with the server, say we log into the gallery or we run an application or we upload an application, that generates log files within this database that we can then very handily connect to. Now how we do this is there is a MongoDB input tool within the connectors category in Alteryx Designer, and after pumping in our MongoDB database credentials into this tool, we are then able to interrogate these logs via the input tool. Now, what this allows us to do is essentially pull through all of those metrics and usage data that we get when we interact with the server and pull them together into a nice little report. Now, this sort of already exists. Alteryx have this Alteryx Server Usage Report macro that they've already pre-packaged and is available publicly to use. But what we were thinking is we could expand upon this, and so there are actually two different output methods that you can have from this tool, one of which is a PDF and the other one is a Tableau workbook. So we were thinking what we can do is maybe expand this usage report as well as have an option for a Power BI dashboard as the output, as a lot of our clients do use Power BI. So that was sort of the initial idea, and then upon sort of researching things further, we realised that Alteryx Designer, it comes with a standard installation of Alteryx Designer comes with this file here, which is called runtime settings.xml in this file location, and in this section of the XML document we have what's called a phone home URL. Now if we pump in our Alteryx server gallery URL in here and then save that file down, what it means is when we then open up Alteryx once again, Alteryx Designer that is, on the desktop, and start using Alteryx Designer, it then starts generating log files for our designer usage as well as our server usage that we already had. And so with these two together, what we can do is we can query these MongoDB databases and essentially pull through designer and server metrics into one place and formulate a nice well-rounded report of both usage stats. And that's exactly what I'll be showing you in a second. So here are some of the key metrics before I jump into the actual whole dashboard itself. So we've got desktop runs over time per different user. So then I can sort of identify which users are really taking to the tool well. I can see Matteo here has loads of different runs. We've got north of 250 in one day. Obviously, you might not expect quite so much. We, as a sort of Alteryx data consultancy, use Alteryx more than your average business, but the idea still stands that you can sort of identify users who are really using the tool to its fullest degree and sort of congratulate and reward them. And you can also identify where uptake isn't as much, and then you can maybe try and hold workshops and nurture those users a bit more to try and increase engagement with Alteryx Designer. Secondly, here we've got tool palette usage, so I can identify which users are using which tool palettes, just to get an idea of classifying which users are doing what. As well as here we've got the search terms that the different users have in that global search box which exists in the top right of your Alteryx Designer window. So this allows us to see what are people searching because they're confused about, which tools are they searching for. We've got VLOOKUP here, for example, identify what exactly people are looking to search on either the community or within Alteryx Designer itself. So before I jump into the dashboard, I'm just going to actually show you the workflow itself. You can see we've got quite a large workflow here, but it's very simply just pulling through all of the metrics and formulating them into a nice report. There are two sections here. We've got the server section on this top leg and the designer section in this bottom leg. Now these two sections are split into two themselves, one of which is generating an in-period usage data. So what I can do, because this is actually an application, I can designate a start and end date for this report. So say I want to look at the usage stats between two specific dates, then I can very easily do so in this application interface here, and that will generate the report based on those dates. But then in this right half of both of these sections, it's generating all time stats. So maybe I'm interested in seeing, in period stats as well as all time stats in one dashboard. So that's exactly what this is doing. Now, if I just zoom into one of these specific tools here, I can show you exactly what that looks like in terms of how the data gets pulled into the workflow. So you can see we've got lots of information here, but this column here, this data column, is what really contains the valuable information that we can parse out and contains all of those useful metrics that we can then generate a report from. So the report that we generate from this, or in the dashboard, is like so. So here we've got a nice sort of title page. All of these dates get sort of dynamically updated based on the dates the report was run for. And then here we can start going into the actual in-period designer usage stats. So we've got things like active users, tools and workflows used per user, the example workflows and the help workflows accessed for different users. We can filter for a specific user. So say I want to look at exactly what Matteo's doing, then I can filter this and it carries across all of the different visuals. You can see we've got desktop workflow runs over time. So you saw this earlier. We've got desktop workflow runs in total, and then we can have an average, based on the number of days that we've got over the time period, and then the total workflow runs here. Different tool usage, so the sort of split of what tools people are using as well as their tool palettes. And as mentioned earlier, we've got this word cloud for all the search terms that people are using, and then we also have the tools that people actually used after doing those searches. So we can see most of them are in the developer or the crew macros category in our case, and you can also look at the specific individual tools themselves, as well as a table of all of the different search terms used for all of the users. Now after this we've got the all-time stats. This is exactly the same, so I'm going to skip over this just very quickly because they're very similar to the previous stats, just very different in that we're pulling in a bit more data. And then next here we've got the server usage stats. So in period here we've got, again, active users. We can actually log the server sessions themselves, so we can see how many server sessions as a user had in this time period, as well as what that average is per day. We can plot them over time. We've got uploaded apps per subscription, total server sessions per user. We've got the total and average app executions, so we can see who's running apps on the server. We've got all the app execution outcomes, was it an error, success, unknown, or warning over time. We've got the different schedules for all the different workflows that we have in that period. Again, we've got the uploaded apps per user, who's uploading applications, who's executing them, you can see here. Total applications run, so per app, how many times has it been run in this period. And then we've also got a nice graph of this information as well. And again, so we've just got more of the same, except we've got all time stats here. And this time what we can do is we can actually filter based on the dates, because we've had Alteryx server for years now. We don't want to look at all of the data, we just want to look at the past year. We're very easily able to do so in this view here. So what we would do is we would work with you to sort of pre-package this runtime settings XML to start logging the usage of your Alteryx designer users as well as your server users. And then we'll sort of round that off very nicely into a nice report, and then you can make actionable insights from very easily. Thank you very much.
Great work, George. Thanks so much for that. Well, just to finish off the user group presentation for today, we're going to be taking a look at a 5-minute mastery session for the RegEx tool. So let's dive into Alteryx now, shall we, and see if we can learn a little bit more about this rather Marmite flavoured tool. Some people love it, some people hate it. I personally love the tool, and hopefully I'm going to convert you over to that love side once we've seen how the tool can work. Now, I've just highlighted here 3 main ways you can start to utilise the RegEx, or regular expression as it stands for, tool within your workflow. And that's either to parse some data out, to match some data, or simply to replace some values. Now, the way that RegEx works is it's phenomenal at taking a look and identifying certain sequences of characters within a text string rather than specific characters themselves. And what I mean by that is I can see they've got this text field represented here, and I've got this ID that I'm going to want to parse out, AYX 45607. I want to pull that out, and I can't explicitly say, well, just pull out AYX 45607, because next time that I run this, or perhaps in some later records that I've got, that value is going to change. So I can't explicitly say get out these characters from here, but with RegEx what I can do is say look for this character sequence, and wherever you find a value within this text string that matches that sequence, i.e. AYX and then 5 numbers after it. We don't mind what those numbers are, just 5 numbers. Then once you found that, pull it out, and that's what we're going to do here in this parse regex example. So the data's coming into here, and what we do within the regex tool is first of all select the column we would like to parse, and of course that's going to be our text field. Just going to run this workflow so we can see some data coming on through. So clicking back onto the tool, we select that column to parse, going to be our text field, and then we write in our regular expression. Now, this can look a little bit like hieroglyphics if you don't understand what regex is, but what we're going to do is we're going to write this from scratch. And if I click on this little plus button, we're going to see all the different things we can put into our regular expression, which symbolizes some of the characters that we're looking to get out. Now, if we're looking for AYX followed by 5 digits, then we'd utilize this part within our expression, the \D, and that symbolizes a digit. And you can start to join all of these, have different combinations of these different snippets of the expression, saying digit, then a lowercase letter, then a space, then a tab. You know, you can build that up, and then once it matches that sequence, that's what we're going to pull it out. So to start us off with our regular expression, all we need to do is to put in an open and then a closed bracket, and this is what's called a marked group. And I'm going to say to regex that I want to pull out anything that's within this marked group. So I know that my ID that I want to get from this text field starts with AYX and then has 4 digits. Let's start off by actually just typing in AYX, and that's going to explicitly look for those characters, and then I can say \D. Now that's just 1 digit at the moment. In order to get 5 digits, I could put in \D 5 times, but that can look rather messy. But another way to do that, perhaps, would be to open up, I still don't know what these brackets are called, but I'm going to call them squiggly brackets, you know what I mean, they kind of got a little kink in them. Open up one of those, put in the digit number 5, close down the squiggly bracket, as you can see there, and that's all wrapped up within our marked group. And I can see here that I'm going to have a field called regex out1, and I might just call this my client ID, because that's what I'm pulling out, and then run the flow, and then I can take a look what's coming out of this tool now, and it should, drum roll, here we go, there it is, my client ID, and it's matched that sort of pattern we put in here, AYX and then 5 digits, found that and then pulled it out into a separate column. Really interesting. Now I've also put in another number here which has 5 digits as well. And let's say, for example, I wanted to pull out just the number 45607 and actually not have the AYX prefix. If I was just to put in my marked group here, just 5 digits, and give that a run, then that would actually pull out the first iteration that's seen there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but that's not actually the ID I want. But what I could actually do as well is put in the AYX prefix outside of the marked group. You see that's on the left hand side of the marked group, so it's saying I don't want to pull out this value, but it's still part of the character sequence that I want. So when I run this, rather than having the first value of 5 digits pulled out, it pulls out the second one because it's noticed that it's got that AYX prefix on it just outside of the marked group, so therefore it hasn't actually pulled it out in my value. Really interesting way of utilizing the regex tool there. Another one, a good use case to how to use regex, is I've got 3 addresses here, and some of them contain some postcodes and some of them don't. Now a Jersey postcode is formatted as JE, 2 numbers, and then 2 letters. And what I'm going to want to do here is to create a new field and say, does this column, or does this record, excuse me, contain a postcode, yes or no? And that's going to be the match function that we've got here in the regex tool. So again, my column to parse is the text one, and then I'm just selecting my output method as match now rather than parse as it was previously, and this is my expression. I'm going to run you through it and see if we can make some sense of this. So I've got dot star, that means anything. So notice how that's just the left hand side of my marked group. I want anything before it. And then notice how on the other side of my closed bracket, that marked group is saying what I want to parse out, I said anything as well. So it can be anywhere within this text string is what I'm saying there. Starting us off, open up that bracket to signify this is a marked group. This is now what I want to pull out. JE, because I know that all my postcodes start with JE. Digit, \D, remember we found that from our dictionary here. We see that's what a digit symbolizes. We've got those squiggly brackets, you see, open up 2, so it symbolizes 2 digits. And then I've got this within square brackets, A-Z, and that means any letter between A to Z, so therefore pretty much any letter within the alphabet. And then again, I've got the squiggly brackets there for 2, so that means 2 of those, and then closing down the brackets to signify the end of my marked group. So again, if you're looking at this regular expression of face value, it can look rather, it doesn't look very good, doesn't it? It's just like some gobbledygook pretty much put into here. But if we break it down and we know what this expression means, it says anything. Here's my marked group, JE, 2 digits, 2 letters, close my marked group, anything after that. And then once you break it down like so, it's really easy then to understand regex. And coming out of here, I then get a true or false. Does this text string contain something that matches this expression, yes or no, i.e. my postcode? And we can see here that the one in the middle is the one that's actually missing the postcode. And it can be utilized perhaps with some address verification or validation perhaps. And then finally what I want to do here, top secret tip, let's hide that for now. What I'm going to do here is take my text value and I've got a date. And all I'm going to want to do is replace the year from 2021 to be 2022. The way I've done that is I've actually utilized the parse function first, similar to what we did in the first example. And I'm saying looking for where you find 2 digits, a /, and then 2 more digits. And that's going to be the day and the month part of my dates part. So I just called it date part, as you'll see. Now once I've got that, what I'm doing here in this other formula is I'm creating a new date. I'm just taking the date part, which we've got here, and then I'm saying, well, find out the year of now, date time now, and essentially that's going to give me the value of 2022. So I can see here I've now got the updated date. What I'm doing next is I'm actually using regex within a formula tool, as you'll see here, rather than in the regex tool itself. I've just utilized the regex replace function. It says, well, take a look in the text column, now that I've got this new date already created. Take a look in here, find where you see a value that matches this regex expression. See, 2 digits, /, 2 digits, /, 4 digits, which of course will match my date here, and then replace wherever you find something that matches that with the new date we've created previously. So therefore it looks like this coming in, flick into the output, it's updated that value now to be 2022 based upon the regular expression it's found in there. And that would be really hard to do outside of regex, but the regex tool itself now gives me the functionality to do all of that. Awesome tool. Now here is the top secret tip. If you want to see a little bit more about regex and it's still not making too much sense, go to RegEx 101. And I'll just pop open my internet browser now to explain what that is. So this is RegEx 101. You can see I just open up my web browser, put that in there, regex101.com, and this is a fantastic resource for getting your regex expressions correct. Now I'll just put it in this one here. Let's say I want to match this date, and the reason why regex 101 is really useful because it has this dictionary, this quick reference down here to show you all the different parts. There's digits, non-word characters, 0 or more, 3 of, all this sort of stuff. It shows you everything. And if I start to type in my regex, so D and then 2, you can actually see what it will match going forward. It goes / and then D2 again, and then it's going to match up a little bit more, and then I'm going to go D2 as well, D4 like so, and put a / in here, and hopefully that will see you can match up what I'm looking for in my regular expression in the test string at the bottom. So fantastic resource for getting to grips a little bit more with your regex tools. Alright, well that's the user group content we had for this quarter. I really hope you found it insightful. Thanks again for everyone who joined us in person at Digital Jersey Hub. It was a great event, lots of energy, lots of good fun, and we'll be coming back in the next few months for 2022.1. So looking forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much for your time and attention. Have a great rest of your day today. See you soon. Bye-bye.